Thank you for the introduction. Good, at least I don't have to say it now. And you're still here, there's still people here who didn't sleep in Saturday morning. It's a pity for you, but you can have a nap now and get some coffee. And good, yes, as Jay said, I am the director of Inara. Some of you might have heard of it. It means light, or can also mean light shop in modern Arabic, or enlightenment. It was an organization founded about 15 years ago in Saarbrücken on the study of the origins of Islam. It is a bit different because most of us, let's say, it's not like the Communist Party, you get a secret handshake and you become a member, but we, the hardcore, we're not Islamologists by formation. So our founder, Professor Ohlich, my predecessor, was a professor of Christian origins, and he was a bit of a heretic. So he had doubts about the divinity of Christ and doubts about the Trinity. But as a good scholar, you research it, and then you run into Islam, which of course is the Qur'an is a Christological polemic. We started asking questions because the traditional accounts of Islam, as you read in every handbook, there are huge problems with that. Also that most of the texts date from the late 8th actually into the 9th century. So we don't have any first-hand accounts of what happened supposedly in the 7th century. So we got together and things started. We've now 15 years. We organized 2 congresses every 2 years. We just had one in the beginning of May with 25 speakers, and then we publish volumes, so 11 hitherto. We have a website. Part of it is in English, inara.net. There's more on the German, on the French websites, but there's English. If you scroll down, keep going. Next section. And then there is a summary of the work we've done, which is a bit, if you press on it, it's introducing Inara. It's a summary of our research findings hitherto in English. If anybody's interested, you can find it. You can find it there. Good. That is the introductory blurb for that. Now let's get to work. Can we have the PowerPoint, please? Thank you. Good. I have to warn you, I'm not good with PowerPoints. I'm still learning this. I'm not good with computers, and then we have to go to the beginning. Oh, okay. Okay. What did I do? No, I have to go to the top. Yep. Good. That is good. So when we started, okay. Now that my screen is blinking. Good. Okay. When we started about 15 years ago, we only had questions. So the thing is, how did Islam happen? Where did the Qur'an come from? That is a question that that's still in progress. How it actually happened, we don't know. We know most of all how it didn't happen. The problems are with, let's say, Mecca, with Medina, and with Muhammad, just primarily to keep things simple. There are problems qua genre and qua content. So, for example, in the 7th century, why do we have a prophet? The age of prophecy with written prophets is long over. We will see that in a second. Secondly, how much, if anybody here wanted to write a biography of Ezekiel or Jeremiah, how long would your book be? Very short. So why do we have a seerah? It's just, so prophets are chosen by God. They don't need biographies. So we have several problems. When it is the Qur'an, we have several problems there too. First of all, it is impossible that the Qur'an comes from Mecca or Medina for several simple reasons. We have a map. Whoops. We have a map here of the region. On the top, we have Arabia Petraea, which is the Greco-Roman part of the ancient Near East. Then we have Arabia Deserta, which, as it means in Latin, it's empty Arabia. It doesn't mean you have your desert there. It means there is nothing there. Then you have Arabia Felix, the south with Yemen, Happy Arabia, which is based on a translation mistake of Arabic Yaman, which is south, but it can also be lucky, happy, because sinister, left, gauche, is bad. What we see in this region in this period is the Arabic writing system that we know nowadays is what we see on the top left up there. This writing system was largely used in late antiquity only in Arabia Petraea. It's used somewhat in Arabia Deserta, but only at Oasis. These are the Nabateans running the frankincense route. What you see on your top right and your bottom left is the so-called Sabaic writing. It comes from Yemen, so it comes from the Mediterranean, but already in the Bronze Age it got to Yemen, so 1200 BC. The culture of Yemen heavily influenced the Arabian Peninsula up until the Jordan. In late antiquity, we find this Sabaic writing system used to write various Semitic languages. The problem with this is that if in the 7th century the Qur'an had been written in Mecca or Medina, it would necessarily have used the Sabaic writing system, which is used for Safa'itic and Thamudic and Hismaic and Dedantic and all these little lesser-known ancient North Arabian languages. Secondly, all of the evidence, when you look at inscriptions, so they're unvocalized, they're short text, they don't say much. How do we know what language an inscription is written? Well, there are a few diagnostic indicators. For what we call Arabic nowadays, one of the indicators is the article al, so al-Malik, the king, and what have you. This type of Arabic we find largely only in Arabia Petraea, not in Medina and Mecca. So we have a double problem. Nobody spoke the language in Mecca and Medina in the period, and if they had written it, they would necessarily have used a different script. So we have two axes. A third axis is the content of the Qur'an. Good, so Inara, as we said, it's not the Communist Party. We don't have any teaching. It's called the Saarbrücken School, I've heard. But it's not that we actually get together and decide what we think and do. Sort of a consensus slowly emerges over the last 15 years. And the Qur'an, I would say, is originally a Christian book. So who is the most, one of the most quoted figures in the Qur'an? Jesus. So how many times is Muhammad mentioned in the Qur'an? 4 times. So would you believe a New Testament that only mentioned Jesus 4 times? Well, I don't need an answer, but good. The other point is that if you look at the Quran and the intertextuality of the Quran, the allusions to classical literature, to Jewish literature, including the Talmud, but also to Christian literature, so we find allusions to Tertullian, as we will see, to St. Augustine, to St. Jerome, etc. Who would have understood that in Mecca and Medina? It's a question. So the Quran contains largely a Christological polemic. Who would have understood that if we are talking about illiterate merchants? The other point is that the testimony of all of the early church fathers and what have you on what we now call Islam, they talk about a heresy. This is important because you can only have a heresy in the Roman Empire where the imperial orthodoxy holds sway, you know, with the church councils and excommunicating and anathemizing people. That only works within the Roman Empire. If Islam had originated in Mecca and Medina outside of the Roman Empire, who would have cared? It would have become a new religion. And there are all kinds of post-Christianisms that emerged outside of the Roman Empire that nobody really bothered about. The other point, just to go back to the writing, as you all know, the Arabic writing system is a little bit unclear, uses the diacritic dots, so it can be a ya, a ta, a ba, a nun, and what have you, an ein or al rein, and what have you. If you had used this Sabbaic writing system, it has more phonemes than what we call the Arab language has. You wouldn't have needed the diacritics. The writing system that we now use for Arabic is actually derived from Aramaic. This is another point when we look at the content of the Quran. As we will see in a bit, the theological vocabulary of the Quran is borrowed from Aramaic. This doesn't necessarily need to surprise us. In English or in French, the theological vocabulary is borrowed from Latin, and in Russian, it's borrowed from Greek. Why? Because that's the language of the missionaries. But it implies, so if it had been in Mecca and Medina, who would have spoke Syriac? So one of the important things that we must remember is that what we now call Arabic is actually an Islamic Semitic language. So it spread with Islam. So, for example, what we have there as Arabia Felix, they spoke other languages up until the rise of Islam. Islam replaced the indigenous languages, for example, Egypt, where they spoke Coptic, North Africa, where they spoke Berber, and the only people to kind of survive were the Iranians, but that's a different story. No. Good. An important source of the rise, for the rise of Islam, are, for example, the Oriental church fathers, such as Afrahat. Here we can see Islam slowly emerging. For example, with Afrahat, we see that the holy day is Friday. Why is the holy day Friday? Well, due to Good Friday. So we see more Christian roots. So my only remark in briefly passing here is that we have sources, but they're not the Islamic sources. And I was discussing with Jay and some other people here, we have this book, Hoyland, Seeing Islam as Others Sought. I'll get to that in a bit. But these testimonia supposedly mentioning Muhammad and early Islam are of little use. I would say with Inara that we can only speak of Islam from the 750s onward, from the Abbasid period onward, as a political ideology, and the Umayyads and beforehand is not Islam, and the Rashidun caliphs like our friend Muhammad probably didn't exist, or if anybody has first-hand evidence, they can show it to me in the break. Do something. when you think everything I was saying is crazy, just to keep things simple, and because Alistair has threatened to do things with me if I exceed an hour, with one inscription, we can kind of dismantle the entire Islamic narrative of early Islam. That's this inscription. As you see, it's not written in Arabic, it's written in Greek. What does the inscription start with? What is at the beginning of the inscription? A cross. Okay, that's interesting. Then Epi, then we find in Greek Abdallah. Abdallah is, we know now it's an Islamic name and what have you. But we were discussing yesterday Deutero Yesaya with the servant songs. This is the Ebed Yahweh, of course, in the servant of God, the servant of the Lord. It's a title. It's also in pre-Islamic Arabic, it's Christian. Abdallah, so the servant of God. Then we have muawiyah. That's interesting because in Arabic the bloke is called muawiyah. But in Greek and Aramaic and in Hebrew he's muawiyah. Then we find he's Inarah al-Mu'minin. So it's Greek, it's Arabic, but it's transcribed into Greek. The Amir al-Mu'minin, we know, that's the commander of the faithful. But the question is, who are the faithful? Doesn't say, I don't know, it just says commander of the faithful. Who are the faithful? It doesn't say Muslims. The interesting thing here is, do we have something that points somewhere? Pardon? Oh. Okay, we have a small commercial break, a word from our sponsors, and oh. If you, yes, if you want, but. Okay, well, no, I'll just go on here with the 5 pillars of Islam. As we said, with the Aramaic influence, you have the 5 pillars, the Shahada, the Salat, the Tsaum, the Zakat, and the Hajj. What is interesting here, none of these words are Arabic. Shahada is Aramaic. It's a martyr in Christian, in Syriac. Salat, salat in Aramaic, or in Semitic it means to kneel. To kneel in prayer is Aramaic. Tsaum comes from Aramaic, but it's actually originally Hebrew. Thank you. It's originally Hebrew. It's in the Bible. It's a fast. Zakat comes from Jewish Aramaic, alms. And Hajj, of course, these are in Judaism, you have had the pilgrimages, the 3 annual pilgrimages where you had to go to the temple. These are called the Hajj, also in Hebrew, so in Aramaic. Good. That was the commercial break. Now we're back to our friend Muawiyah. How does this? Ah, yes. What's interesting, the inscription here records the renovation of Roman baths, the hot baths, that he reconstructs. He dates then the inscription, as one did in the day, but there were multiple dating systems in circulation. So you use the indiction years, that's the Byzantine taxation system. So that implies that Muawiyah still had some link with the Roman Byzantine Empire. He then dates it according to the years of the province, the Anni Provinciae, which is when the province entered the Roman Empire. Then he dates it according to the years of the local patriarch. And then he dates it to year 42, kata arabas in Greek. This year 42, because he's using multiple dating system, we know comports to 664, which means it's which dating system? Pardon? The hijri dating system. But this causes a severe question, namely, no, the starting point is 622, it's clear. We know this from the Anni Provinciae and the other dating systems used. It's 622. What is the problem? What? No, it's called here Kata Arabas, the epoch Kata Arabas. What is the problem? So the thing is, even if you don't know Greek, what is the Greek word for hijra you could use? Exodus. That's when you leave from one city and you go to another city. So, I mean, this is not Homeric Greek, but it's not bad Greek either. I mean, it's not Pindar, but it's acceptable. Why call it Kata Arabas if it's an Exodus? Because it has nothing to do with the Arabs. It is the flight of Muhammad from Mecca to Medina. So this inscription shows that the hijra is a bit of fantasy. He knows nothing of the hijra. So if there's no hijra, what do we do with Muhammad? Is there a Muhammad? Just a question. So this inscription in itself kind of undermines the entire thing. Also, because there is nothing Islamic in this inscription. According to Islamic tradition, he is a caliph. Of course, we know the caliph was only started with Abd al-Malik towards the end of the 7th century. So he's not a caliph, he is just a servant of God and the commander of the faithful. Nothing more, nothing less, nothing Islamic. When you are looking for the Islam as a Christian book, where did the Qur'an come from? I think it's a lectionary. If you look at the Arabic text, and you can do this if you take any Qur'an translation of your choice, what do you see? You see short verses. In Arabic, they often rhyme. It's rhyming prose in Arabic. And it's interspersed with long verses. These are interpolations. So we see about 3 or 4 phases of interpolations in the Quran, where the Quran was Islamicized and where Muhammad was inserted. When we looked at the exegetical tradition of the Quran, it is not like Christian exegesis. They're not so much interested in explaining the text or the meaning of the text, but it's the so-called asbab an-nuzul, the circumstances of revelation. They're trying to sync every verse of the Quran to some event in Muhammad's life. We will see that in a bit. When we look at this text, Surat Al-Qadr, what does Surat Al-Qadr talk about? Speak louder. Yes, what about the Quran? Anybody else? Allah punishes directly, yes. What about the Quran? The Quran, at the end of the month of Ramadan, we had the first revelation of the Quran, which begs the question, because it took another, according to Islamic tradition, another 22 years for all of the Quran to be revealed. And according to the Islamic traditions, once a year, Gabriel told Muhammad to recite everything that had been revealed so far. And on the year of Muhammad's death, he apparently had to recite everything twice, just to make sure it was all correctly memorized. Good. So at the end of the month of Ramadan, apparently the Laylat al-Qadr, the night of power or the night of destiny, however you wish to translate it, we have this. Apparently, Surah 97 refers to this. Good. I've just taken any translation. I, of course, don't agree with it, but it would take another 2 hours to explain my new translation, but this will work here. So we have it here. We sent it down on the night of decree. So it's the Arabic, it's the word of God is clear, is what is being sent down. But what will convey to you that what the night of decree is, the night of decree is better than 1,000 months. In it descend angels and the Spirit by the leave of the Lord with every command. Peace it is until the rise of dawn. If you knew nothing about Islam and had never heard of Islam, this surah could refer to something else, namely Christmas, because it's the word of God descending. So in Islam, what do you do in the month of Ramadan before you celebrate the Eid of the first revelation? You fast. The Tsaum, we already had that with the, which we saw was Jewish Hebrew word. Certainly not Arabic. It can't be Arabic. So, anybody Orthodox here? Oh, good. There's some hope. What do Orthodox people still do in Advent that everybody else has unfortunately forgotten about? You tsaum, you fast. And with the Orthodox, Advent is also 6 weeks still and not 4 weeks, because it was a Holy Roman Emperor who decided all of these Advent markets were much too long and he didn't get it over with, so he shortened Advent to 4 weeks. He was French, of course, but what do you expect? But the point is, so the Arabic text in the Qur'an, which actually refers to the so-called revelation, beginning of the revelation, doesn't mention Muhammad, doesn't mention the Qur'an. And it's, as I said, it's the exegesis, the asbab al-nuzul, they're reading the later Islam into the text of the Qur'an. If you read this neutrally, it's clearly a reference to Christmas, the fasting of Advent, because it's the word of God. So why would you have a big party for the, just to keep it simple for now, and I'm running out of time, I suppose, but why would you have a big party for the first installment? Maybe the last installment would be good, but that also causes problems. No. Good. As I said, we only have 4 verses that mention Muhammad in the Quran. This is all we kind of know about what a Muhammad is from the Quran. The question is, especially when you look at the Arabic text, we don't know if this is a name or a title, or those who know Arabic grammar, Muhammadun, it can also be a passive participle. Most praised is. This is all we know. We don't know this. When we look at the 61:6, the last reference, giving glad tidings of messenger to come after me, whose name shall be Ahmad. This is an interesting thing here, because you could make an argument this is a reference to the Paraclete. Why? Because in John 14, Jesus says there will be a Paraclete, a comforter who will come after me. If you look at some of the Syriac versions, they translate this, Others, they transcribe the Greek terms. If you have parakletos, you also have parakletos in Greek, which is to praise and praiseworthy. If you only write the Rasam, unvocalized Syriac, you could read it both ways. So anyway, we see something happening here in dialogue with Christianity. Furthermore, when you look at the text of the Quran, you read the Quran in Arabic, you see a bunch of terms that usually get lost in translation. So one of them is kahin, which is mentioned several times. Kahin. Yes, but in the translations, a soothsayer. It's obviously a priest because in Syriac, a kahin, kohen in Hebrew, it's just a priest. Another term that's mentioned is the shirk, the mushrikun, who are often translated as polytheists. The Arabic sharaka does not mean polytheist. It means somebody who associates, which is a slight difference. So Jay's wife will not deny that there are other women. He's just not allowed to hang out with them, I think, but I assume, yeah. So this is the difference. Shirk means you're not allowed to associate anything with Allah. It doesn't mean that you're a polytheist, because the problem is if we're in the 7th century, there are no polytheists left. Those who know their Roman history remember Julian Apostate in the 4th century who tried to reinstitute polytheism. It didn't work out well. He went to, I think it was Edessa, and it was the last pagan city, and apparently with a big altar, and he was looking forward to herds of cows getting burnt and having a good barbecue. And only a priest showed up late with one chicken, and sacrificed the chicken to please the emperor, and then said, yeah, but my wife's got the potatoes on, I have to be back in time for dinner, and can I have 2 sestersti for the chicken? So he was in thing. When the Quran talks about mushrikun, the Quran uses several terms for Christians. The Natsara, Ansar, which in Arabic is a Christian term for evangelizing and what have you. It has to do with Nazareth, which has nothing to do with Nazareth, but the Hebrew word netzer, the branch. These are different Christians, let's say more Jewish Christians. The Chalcedonian Christians who believe in the Trinity are the mushrikun. They are the shirk. Why? Anybody? They're associated, yeah, you have a Trinity. They don't like the Trinity. And because remember, our explanation of the Trinity comes from St. Augustine with his personae, and yeah, that was the beginning of the problems with the Orthodox. Also because St. Augustine didn't know Greek, and he should have been anathemized alone for that, but good. How we see Muhammad being inserted into Islamic history. One second, let's just see when the next commercial break is on. Okay, it's like a Super Bowl show in the meantime, I guess. And then I have to sing, but that might be detrimental. One of the most famous events in Muhammad's life is apparently the Battle of Badr. When you read the Sirat and the Marazi lit part of the Sirah, which might be the oldest part of the Sirah, relatively speaking, so certainly not early 8th century, but later 8th century, and nothing to do with Muhammad, of course. One of the primary events was the Battle of Badr. All that we have here, we don't know where Badr is located. It's sort of saying the Battle of Thermopylae, but we've never heard of Thermopylae. We have no evidence of the Persians Empire, if we were to say that. I see you're worried, but if we were to say that. So who are the enemy? The Quraysh. Well, the Quraysh are also only mentioned once in the Quran, the Surah Al-Quraysh. And what it actually means there, well, that would be another lecture. Let's skip that. This famous battle of Badr. No, whatever spoils you take, 1/5 is for Allah, and the messenger, his close relatives, orphans, the poor, and needy travelers. If you truly believe in Allah and what we revealed to our servant on that decisive day, this is Arabic, Yawm al-Furqan, when two armies met at Badr, and Allah is most capable of everything. So who here knows a bit about Islamic history? Good. So Battle of Badr, give me a brief rundown. No. Okay. Anybody else? Ja. U bent uit Nederland. Ja, okay, goed. Yeah. So when Muhammad was in Medina, he had to feed his followers. And remember, the followers of Muhammad at Medina are called the Ansar, which supposedly means the helpers or something. But as I said, this is the root of Nazarene with the Christians. Of course, the guys that flee with Muhammad are called the Muhajirun, the Hajjis, who go there. But we just saw that the Hajj was kata arabas in Greek. The point being, in Syriac, when we find reference to the Islamic dating, they talk about the Shanat de Mehagriyae, i.e. the year of the Hagarites. Hijra in Arabic just means Hagarite. It doesn't mean exile or fleeing. And to run it down, but I'll do that in this afternoon session, the origins of Islam. The Arabs used the war that started in 622 against the Persians to declare independence. So it's the year of the founding of their kingdom, the kingdom of the Hagarites. But the problem was, in Medina, Muhammad had to feed his followers. But since they were very pious men, of course, as you know, they didn't like manual labor, so it's much better to make booty. So they robbed caravans, and they robbed this big caravan of the Quraysh with 1,000, depending on the accounts. And in the Sirat, the Marazi literature, you have these fantastic accounts of people chopping off limbs and heads and stuff. It's somebody should make a film. And you know, you have this story about one guy comes to Muhammad saying, "Oh, my Rasul, I can no longer fight. They've cut off my right arm and it's hanging on with a tendon." And Muhammad takes the sword out of his hand, cuts off the tendon and puts it in his left hand and says, "Okay, go back and do some more fighting. No Purple Heart for you." So all we have is, the only reference we have here is this one verse. What we lose in the translation here, on that most decisive day, Yawm al-Furqan, Yawm al-Furqan. And when the two armies met at Badr, when we look elsewhere in the Quran, in the Arabic, see 2661, they've certainly denied the truth, so we will soon face the consequences of their ridicule. Jam'ani is the point here, Jam'ani, which is when the two armies met. Look this up. This is certainly a reference to the Exodus here in the Quran. When we look at 250, And remember when we parted the sea, rescued you, and drowned Pharaoh's people before your very eyes. This is the drowning of the army of the Pharaoh in the Red Sea, which we find in Exodus 14. What is this day called in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament? Huh? In Syriac, yeah. No, but in Hebrew it's called Yom HaYehoshua, the day of salvation, which in the Syriac Bible is Yom de Furqana, which is the day of salvation as well. In the Islamic tradition, it would, faraka, it means to decide, what have you. It's the day of decision, but this was just a raid. This wasn't Berlin, April 1945. This was just a raid. What we see here is that what is originally a biblical reference to the most important event of the Exodus has been reinterpreted as an event in Islamic history. So to answer the question that Jay asked me to answer here, what does Inara think about the origin of the Quran? I think it's certainly a Christian book. With this one example, we see how it has been Islamified in the later exegetical tradition. There are 100 other examples I could give, but that would really try your patience, I suppose. The problem here is Yawm al-Furqan. Furqan is not morphologically Arabic. And what we also find in the Islamic tradition, the later second caliph after Muhammad, who probably never existed, Umar ibn al-Khattab, here gets the title Farouk, which the Egyptians know. You had a king of that, it's a name. Farouk is Syriac, it means Yehoshua, the savior. What Umar ibn al-Khattab actually did to save the day at the day of Badr remains unclear. We see here a biblical text that has been Islamified, Islamic. This goes on. That is something else. We're running out of time. I'll just mention it. This is a coin from India. It's just interesting where Rasul is called an avatar of God here. But Muhammad al-Khattam. Good. So if we look in the Quran, another thing with Muhammad. So who or what is a Muhammad? Is it a person or a title? As we saw, it's only mentioned 4 times. He's only mentioned, he or it is only mentioned 4 times. Here we have Muhammad is not the father of any of your men. Is the Rasulillahi wa Khatam an-Nabiyyin. He is the seal of the prophets. Question is, what does seal of the prophets mean? What often happens, and this is one of the funny things that happens in Islamology, is that you start in the 7th century and you can pretend nothing happened beforehand. As we will see in this afternoon session where I discuss Mecca, it's kind of handy to have moved everything to Mecca, where nothing ever happened, and if anything happened, you can never know about it. It's what the French would call a blank canvas, a clean slate in English, I think, yeah. That you can comfortably ignore everything. If, as at the beginning of my lecture, I pointed out that the Quran actually comes from Syria, Arabia Petraea, you're in the middle of Greco-Roman antiquity, late antiquity, which has 4,000 years of written history. Longer if you take Ebla into account. Seal of the prophets. So when you read the Islamic narratives on the life, so I would say the Sirat are not so much a biography, but rather a hagiography. The Orthodox people know that. Hagiographies, they're not meant to be sourced biographical accounts, they're meant to serve as an example. Good, so if you want to know the difference between Christianity and Islam in a nutshell, if Christianity is the imitation of Christ, then Islam is the imitation of Muhammad. And both kind of, I would suppose, from a theoretical point of view, lead to quite different results, I assume. The seal of the prophets. According to the biographical literature, you have this story of Sergius Bahira, who sees the young Muhammad when he's on a caravan expedition, and he sees some kind of mark between the shoulder blades. It says, Anta al-Khatam al-Nabayin, you're the seal of the prophets. And this is what everybody's expecting. It's some kind of a mark. And according to Waqidi and Nas, young Muhammad would walk through town saying, Ana al-Khatam, I am the seal. Good. No idea. What is interesting, we have this in, the Orthodox people will know this, the seal of the prophet is a term used for John the Baptist on the Orthodox feast days of his conception and of his beheading. We find this in Syriac. Shalma Rik Khatamiyun de Naviya, referring to Christ. In a Jewish commentary referred by Malbim, it's rather late, but Chotam Hanaviim, referring to Malachi, the last of the prophets. Where does this term come from? As I mentioned earlier, we find allusions to Tertullian in the Qur'an, among others. So this is a big problem if you want to locate the Qur'an in Mecca and Medina, because who's going to read Tertullian in Mecca and Medina? And I don't know, but Arabic translations of Tertullian, Latin to Arabic in Mecca, there might have been a translation bureau, but good. Tertullian, early 3rd century, one of the earliest church fathers, certainly the earliest of the Latin church fathers in Carthage, referring to Daniel, why Daniel said, vision and prophet were sealed, because Christ is the signet of all prophets, fulfilling all that had in days bygone been announced concerning him, for since his advent and personal passion, there is no longer vision or prophet. Blah, blah, his advent seals vision and prophecy. What is he here referring to? Daniel 9:24. The point here is you can't really use the Hebrew Bible because Tertullian is not using the Hebrew Bible. He's probably using a version of the Septuagint closer to the Theta recension. This is the prophecy of the 70 weeks in Daniel 9. Good, we won't get into the grammar here. The basic argument is one of the proofs that Jesus is really the Messiah is that he came when he was supposed to have come right on time with the prophecy of the 70 week years. Good, it involves some mathematics, I won't get into that. The point being that the argument Tertullian is making in his writing against the Jews, you reject the Messiah, but listen, in your Old Testament, Daniel 9, the prophecy of 70 week years, says when the Messiah would arrive, good, he explains it in complicated Latin in the part preceding. The guy arrived smack dab on time at the minute, more punctual than British Rail. What is the argument here, the seal of the prophets? It is, once the Messiah is there, you no longer need prophets. Why? Because the only job of prophets is to announce the coming of the Messiah. So once the guy is there, so John is the last of the prophets. This is why in the Orthodox liturgy still, John the Baptist is called the seal of the prophets. But one has to remember that Tertullian is writing Latin, he uses the term signaculum, and and in Greek it's the suntalethsonai, the Greek term, like signaculum in Latin, it can also mean a confirmation. So it's not the finality as in Semitic. The Greek refers more to a confirmation, because it's seal of approval, you could say. So the reference here, I'm nearly finished. How much time do I have left? I've used it up. Oh, I've still got, I'll be right by. So the point here is the seal of the prophet is certainly, historically speaking, Christ, or John the Baptist, depending how you wish to go around it. And remember, in the Hebrew of Daniel 9, in Daniel 8, the verse preceding, it talks about Ish Hamid. You are the greatly beloved, I think it says in the translation, which means, but it uses Hamad. So Daniel is referred to basically as a Muhammad. So the question is, who is Muhammad in the Quran then? I think it's a messianic epithet, but that would be another lecture. Good. Good, that is here. So when you look at, to answer your question before you kick me off the stage, or the ejection seat, Qur'an, look at it in Syriac. I'm sorry, this is a bit small here, but Kiryana is an Aramaic term for a lectionary. I think with the Quran, the large surah is at the beginning, so those of you who are Catholic or Orthodox, you know what a missal is. You have all of the things you need for a Mass, including biblical texts. The long parts at the beginning, just to give the shortened, very simplified version, are biblical paraphrases that have been augmented. The parts at the end, the short surahs like 97, Surah Al-Qadr, as we've seen, are hymns and prayers. Kirana, you can find in a dictionary. It's for Syriac, it's a lectionary. If you don't believe me and you want to go on, the first surah of the Quran is Surah Al-Fatiha. What does Fatiha mean? The opener, the opening. Look at Syriac here. It's a Syriac term because there are debates in Islam. Is Surah 1 and Surah 113 and 114, the last two, do they belong to the Quran? Surah Al-Fatiha doesn't belong to the Quran according to the Islamic accounts. Why? Syriac gives us the answer. Al-Fatiha is a word for title page. It's just the title page. Good. Just give me 2 more minutes and then I'll see. When you look at the evolution of the Quran, you see a polemic. I will just mention this in passing. Note these verses. When you read 19:1 to 33, Surat Maryam, you don't find a lot that Christians would upset about. 33 to 40 puts 1 to 33 in context. I was talking about interpolations earlier, Islamifying the text of the Quran. 19:1 to 33 discusses the birth of John the Baptist and the birth of Christ. It's a bit different account, especially the birth of Christ. There is an intermediary stage, 3:33 to 63, and then, so here we just see 2 examples of 2 layers of interpolations. The birth account of Christ in the Quran, it seems weird to us, but it's based on the Arabic apocryphal Gospel of Peter, which in turn is based on the apocryphal proto-Gospel of James, which is in turn, and this is why I said you need to know your past. It's from Syria. Kallimachus, hymn 4 to Delos with the Quranic text. This is the birth of Apollo. Remember that in early Christianity there's a long tradition that Jesus looks a lot like Apollo and has to do with that. And I think that's enough, and thank you for your attention.